Hey, welcome to this episode of my podcast, Moms on a Mission. I am your host, Julie Hatch, and I'm really glad you can join me today for this episode of a podcast. The reason I'm so excited about that is because I really believe in everything that I'm saying on this podcast. All in this episode, everything I talk about on this podcast, I fully believe in. You've heard me talk about element types as a way to identify your child's personality type. I've talked about play and time out in nature and parenting styles and sleep and all kinds of things that I have talked about and will be talking about. But today's topic is, I think, probably the most important thing, most influential part of raising a child and affecting their behavior. This is the one thing that is not difficult at all to bring into your child's life and help with their cognitive abilities, their learning abilities, and their emotional health. And that is all about what they eat. Now, before you tune this off and say, oh, brother, how boring. It is a little bit boring. Or I always used to think it was boring, but it is true. It is the biggest, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, factor in a child's behavior, cognitive development, and brain development. So therefore, it cannot be overlooked. So it's all about what they eat. And as you'll find out, I'm going to be talking about not so much about what to try to make your kids eat. It's what not to give them, what to keep away from them, keep out of their system that is causing so much damage. So food is our first medicine. I learned that in Chinese medical school, and ever since then, I completely believe that food is our first medicine. It's easier maybe sometimes to take a pill, but it's not the way to go. Food is the first medicine before anti-anxiety drugs, before antidepressant drugs, before anti-ADHD drugs, before antibiotics even, before any prescriptive medication. Food is the first thing that you should go to try to fix a problem or prevent a problem. Preventing a problem is really the way to go. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Preventing depression and anxiety and learning issues and autism and ADHD and all that kind of stuff. Food is the way to prevent it. So why not? That's pretty cheap, pretty simple, and it's all just in changing how we go about feeding our kids, or not changing if you're already doing it right. I know that I mean, I used to roll my eyeballs when people talked about what kind of food how did I feed my kids? But it really is true. And the thing is that it's not that difficult to implement some changes that I'm going to suggest, that they're just not that difficult. So, I'm going to get a little bit technical here, a little bit scientific and medical. Not for too long, just bear with me for a few minutes, because I'm going to go into the physiology of why food is so important for behavior and learning conditions. And the reason I do this is because for me, I personally always need to know why. Why am I being told that this is what to do and how to do it? I want to know the why behind it. So that's what I'm going to give you, is the why behind it. And I'm going to start with talking about the intestines. And maybe you've heard, or maybe you haven't heard, that probably in the past 10 years is really quite relatively new, the importance of the gut as a second brain. The gut meaning the whole digestive tract, and especially the small intestines where things are absorbed and nutrients are absorbed. That the small intestine, the gut, is the second brain, and is at least as equally important as the brain that we have in our heads. At least as equally important, perhaps more important. And what's kind of cool, I always thought, is that if you think of what the intestines look like, what you see in pictures, and what the brain looks like, they look pretty similar. They're both a bunch of tubes wrapping around each other and creating an organ. So for one thing, the gut and the brain look alike. And the gut is important as a second brain for many reasons. It is directly linked to brain health. And the reason for that is because when we have a healthy gut, when our intestines are working the way they're supposed to, in the lining of the intestine, the gut microbiome, they have all the little cells are close together. And that the purpose of that is to let in the good stuff, the nutrients that we want to get absorbed into us, but almost as importantly is to keep out the bad stuff. The bad stuff meaning microbes, viruses, fungi, yeasts, heavy metals, toxins, all kinds of bad things, chemicals that we ingest. The gut, if it's healthy, will keep that stuff out and keep it going on down through the digestive tract and eventually excreted, gotten rid of. And so that's what we want the gut to do. We want the gut microbiome to be healthy. That is the groundwork for brain health. Now, if the gut lining is not healthy, if any of these things can get through those tight junctures, if the gut microbiome is not healthy, there's gaps. And through those gaps, all kinds of the bad stuff can go through there. The yeast and the fungi and the heavy metals and the chemicals and the viruses. And if you think of all the stuff in our environment, that stuff is getting through these little gaps, entering into the bloodstream, being carried out to all our other organs and our brains. And when these things get to our brains and cross over into the brains, we have a problem. That is when you get autism is linked to this in part. It's not the only reason. ADHD, depression, anxiety, mood swings, behavioral problems, even violent behavior is associated with, linked with, not directly cause and effect, but very directly linked with these bad things getting through our intestine mucosa and into our brains. The other thing about the gut, so part of it, if we have the healthy, then it keeps all this bad stuff out and lets the good stuff in. If we don't have a healthy gut, then we're getting nutrition deficiency. The good vitamins and minerals and stuff are not getting absorbed as they should be because all these other toxins and bad stuff is getting in there. But the other thing is that the gut is a huge producer. There's a little bit of serotonin produced in the brain, but in the gut is where most of the serotonin in our bodies is produced. And again, this is kind of a lot of jargon, and I'm sorry, but serotonin is our feel-good chemical. And so that is why depression and kids' moods are affected by their guts, because the serotonin, the stuff that makes them feel good, is produced in the gut. And if the gut is not healthy, then the serotonin is not being produced as much as it should be. So when you have a leaky gut, I don't know if you've heard that term, but leaky gut is when these spaces open up and all this bad stuff comes through the gut into the bloodstream and gets traveled to the brain. And nutritional deficiencies. If you have deficiency, you have various health problems and mental problems with various vitamin and mineral deficiencies. When toxins and heavy metals and things get through the gut and into the blood, it goes to the brain and it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and that is what affects kids' behaviors and moods and mental health and emotional health and cognitive health. Is from when these things. It's really quite simple. What you put into your body, or no, not what you put into your body. Sometimes we put stuff into our body we don't even mean to. But if we don't have this tight junction between all of the cells in our intestines, the bad stuff gets through, goes to the brain, and causes problems. It's pretty straightforward. So therefore, our brain health is our gut health. So what we eat is completely affecting our brains. Now, when our brain is affected by these substances that aren't supposed to be in there, they're supposed to be kept out and just pass through the intestines, then discarded with as waste. When this stuff goes to the brain, you end up with learning problems, poor concentration, emotional problems, mental health issues, behavioral issues, ADHD, even anger, and I think I had said violent tendencies, behavioral issues. Really and truly, all of these things are affected by our gut health and what we ingest. So the idea is, or the point is, to keep the gut lining healthy so that the bad stuff doesn't get to the brain. And I'm going to talk more about what not to put into the body rather than trying to get your kids to eat fruits and vegetables and all that kind of stuff. But if you can cut out some of the bad stuff that's creating a leaky gut, then you're way ahead of the game. That's really important to prevent a leaky gut. And leaky gut comes from the bad stuff that we eat. It's not complicated. Don't eat the crap food and keep the gut healthy. You'll have a healthy brain. It's not rocket science. Just keep the crap out. Talking about crap, there is an acronym called CRAP. And this is the crap food that we have in our diet so much now. This has really started, I think, probably since the 80s. More and more things have been allowed into our diet. More and more unhealthy things and unhealthy ways of living have been allowed into our diet, marketed, sold, and has started to affect people's, especially Americans' health. And I think it's largely started in the 1980s. But anyways, so the crap food that you want to avoid, and again, it's not all that difficult. Chemicals, don't want to allow chemicals into what you're eating. And artificial, so let's see, chemicals. The R is refined sugar. Refined sugar and refined flour are things that you want to avoid. Artificial flavors and artificial dyes, avoid those. And P is processed food or preservatives. Now, the chemicals are, if there's something in your food that has a really long name that you can't pronounce, it's probably a chemical that you don't want to have go into your child's body. Refined sugar, if there was one thing that I would tell every family to get rid of, is soda. Soda is so, for one thing, unnecessary. It's so bad. It's so much sugar in there. Caffeine, of course, caffeine's not good. But artificial dyes is just, and it leaches important nutrients out of kids' bones. It leaches out calcium, I think, out of the bones. Or the phosphorus in the soda, it's so bad. It's on so many levels, more than just the fact that it's got a lot of sugar in it. And artificial dyes, so many foods have artificial dyes and flavoring in them. So, which means that you sort of have to read labels. And if there is something with fructose in there or any kind of a sugar, especially in the first 2 or 3 ingredients, you don't want to buy that because that's just loaded with sugar, unrefined sugar. Honey is different, maple syrup is different, but the refined sugars are just really bad for our intestinal health. So again, I'm not talking about getting your kids to sit down and eat their fruits and vegetables, although that would be good. But the first thing to do, which I think is an easier thing to do, is just to get rid of the stuff that's bad for them. And just out of this crap, chemicals, refined sugars and flours, artificial flavoring and colors, and processed foods. Take one of those out a month or a week if you can. Just take it out of the house. Mom and dad are the people that are buying the food, at least when the kids are young. And so you have control as to what's in the cupboard. What can a child have access to? So cut out the foods first before you worry about adding in the healthy stuff, although that is important. I know when I had my kids, I made homemade brownies. I made homemade macaroni and cheese. I didn't mind the extra, I did mind the extra work, but I was willing to do the extra work to feed them a little bit healthier. But then once they tasted the boxed mac and cheese or the boxed brownies that you just have to add an egg and some water to and bake them, they liked those better because of the sugar and the salt and the flavorings added to them. My kids preferred that. And of course, it was easier for me. And when you're a busy working mom, It's a lot easier to make boxed mac and cheese or boxed brownies or processed foods or stuff that you just throw in the microwave. It's so much easier. And I get that. I totally get that. But it also makes such a difference to your child's health. And it's not always obvious right away. But if you have a kid who is super, super active or not listening to you or any behavioral problem, and if you were to change their diet and got rid of all of the crap food, you would see their behavior change. I firmly believe that. And like I say, it's not that difficult. It's difficult to get kids to sit, might be difficult to get kids to sit down and eat their broccoli or their spinach, but it's not difficult to take the stuff away because if they don't see it, they don't have access to it. When they go to friends' houses, that's a different thing. Of course, maybe they do have access, and so that's something you can't really control. But in your house, you can control what they have access to. And a lot of parents think that their kids are picky eaters. And they say, oh, but he won't eat that, and I can only feed them this and that. Well, the first thing to do is at least don't feed them white bread with loads of jelly on it. That's wrong on so many levels. They may be picky eaters, but you can work through it. It's not impossible. And you're not a bad mom if you feed them white bread with a lot of jelly on it, but it's not necessary. You don't have to. There are other things that kids will eat. And when kids say that or when parents say that their kids are picky eaters and they won't eat this and they won't eat that, it's usually that the kids just have the parents trained. They refuse to eat something and then they get what they want and the parent accommodates for their picky eating. But as a pediatric nurse practitioner, I can almost guarantee, not 100% of the time, but almost, the kids are not going to starve. If you have healthy options available, like a bowl of grapes washed and ready to eat in the refrigerator, if they have healthy options to grab, they will not starve themselves. They will eat eventually. And it may take some time before they understand that the junk is gone and the good stuff is what's available to them. And the good stuff doesn't taste bad. Fruit is good. Kids like the taste of fruit because it's got natural sugar in it, and so that's a great thing. Carrots are crunchy. Kids like crunchy food. So they won't starve themselves, for one thing. Keep the healthy foods available to them. If you're trying to get them to eat something healthy, like if you cook some peas or some broccoli or some kind of cooked vegetable, and they say no, 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 offer it again the next night, and then let it go for a few days, and then bring it back the next night. And a lot of the times, kids will initially say no to something, and then eventually give it a try and find that it's okay. Or you could try to serve it a different way, or like I say, even just a matter of 1 or 2 weeks, the child might be willing to try it again. At mealtime with food, don't make it a power struggle. Don't force them to eat. Don't threaten them that they have to eat. Don't, take their plate away and say they're going to starve if they don't eat a little better. Don't make it a power struggle. You're going to end up with eating disorders later on in life. There's a couple of things that kids do have control over, and that's about what goes in and what comes out. So it's a whole nother topic, is potty training. But they can control what goes in, and you can't force feed them, and don't force feed them. It's going to cause have terrible effects on them eventually. So my approach is to make all the healthy stuff available to them. Don't be a short order cook saying, okay, yes, I'll cook you this, I'll cook you that. If that's what you want, then that's what I'll do. No, within reason you can do that, but mealtime is mealtime, and you're not a short order cook. There are exceptions to that, certainly always. And then another thing that you can do that is really good for gut health is not likely to happen with kids is fermented food. Kefir is good. Kombucha, which kids I don't think are necessarily going to like. But those are all fermented foods, which are really good for gut health. But short of that, there are probiotics. And I recommend always everybody, kids and adults alike, to take probiotics. It's good for gut health, kids that have constipation or digestive problems, probiotics are good. And there are pediatric probiotics. So just taking a daily probiotic anyways keeps your gut in better health. Again, really pretty simple. So that's pretty much the information that I want to give. It's I don't know. I just want to try to get across the idea that it is just so important to a child's health, and I did say back a little while ago that you may not see differences right away. You don't know, you feed them a healthy meal one night, you're not going to see improvements the next day. Although I have heard stories of parents that have told me that they changed their child's diet, or they took out one thing, sugar or processed flour or something like, or processed food, something they took out, and the behavior changed in a matter of a couple of days. So it's certainly worth giving it a try. And even if you don't see a huge difference, there's nothing wrong with eating healthy. There's nothing wrong with cutting out the junk food, which also makes me think about carbohydrates. A lot of kids like carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are sugar. They break down to sugar, and that contributes to buildup of yeast in the body. Sugar is an inflammator. It causes inflammation. Sugar is just one of those things that sugar, including carbohydrates, is one of those things that kids are better off without. And of course, carbohydrates is what we all like, and kids definitely like carbohydrates. But I just want to make you aware of the effect that these things have on your child's bodies and brains and emotions and mental abilities, all of that. So I'm not meant to be preachy. I just really believe it. If you have a child with hyperactivity, ADHD, depression, anxiety, anything like that that's causing you problems, just check out what they're eating and do the best you can to get rid of the crap foods. And if you have any questions, go to my website and let me know what your questions are. I'm happy to answer them for you. JuliePhillipsHatch.com. I just think that this is such an important topic that I encourage you to reach out and ask any questions that you have. JuliePhillipsHatch.com. Okay, so that is the end of this episode. Although I do want to talk about next episode is going to be a continuation of this, in that I have a guest, Katie Kimball, who is hugely into kids' nutrition, how they eat, and she's launched a nationwide program in getting kids involved in food preparation, which was something I forgot to mention. Another way to help your kids eat healthy and to eat healthy is to get them involved in the food preparation. Help them shop for a meal, plan the meal, decide what the meal is going to be, and help cook the meal. So Katie talks about that, about how you can get even your youngest child involved in the kitchen and preparing food, because when they are involved in the preparing of the food, chances are they're going to be more likely to eat it. So she's a great guest. She's going to be on next week, and so tune in then. In the meantime, share this with anybody that you can think of that might benefit from it. Give it a like, give it a comment, whatever. And as I said, I invite you to drop any questions to me at JuliePhillipsHatch.com. All right, I will see you next time. Thanks.